So much. Appreciate it. I hope everyone is having a really productive week. I've seen lots of you, lots of sessions, and all being very attentive. It's been fantastic. I just got off of watching my colleague do a presentation on PeopleSoft Test Framework. It was heavily attended, really exciting to see the folks out there joining these sessions. It was exactly what we were hoping to see. This particular session is one that I've done in the last couple of user conferences and seems to get a lot of attention. It is the PeopleSoft Fluid Delegation Framework best practices. We'll walk you through the process of getting it set up and using it and what it looks like. And um, hopefully it is a session that you can use to take and literally start to play around with it in your organization. Um, Word of warning: I am I guess I guess warning may be too harsh. A note that I am a financials and supply chain person, and so all of my screenshots, if there's time, I might dive into a live demo even, are all going to be financial supply chain, but the framework itself is equally as everything you see is available in the HCM suite as well. So we're not limited to FSCM. It's just that that's where my expertise lies, and so that's where my examples and demo come from. Who am I? This is me. I, I suggest you take a picture, not because of how great that picture turned out, but I want you to have my email and my phone number. Those are real, and I want you to text me or call me or email me if you have any questions that we don't cover in today's session or any PeopleSoft related question you might happen to have. Those are the best ways to get in contact with me. They're real, and I encourage you to capture this and give me a call, give me a text, send me an email, and we'll start to collaborate. Okay, that's me. This is us, Spirit MC. So we've got a lot of presentations. I just literally got off of the demo of PTF that my colleague Tarun just did. And here we are already 2/3 of the way through the sessions. Can't believe it's flying by this fast, but this is our delegation framework best practices. More about Spear MC. We like to brag about how great we are. Maybe our customers can do that for us, or Gartner, who has recognized us for our PeopleSoft expertise over the years. We are PeopleSoft centric. This is a slide we like to show not just to our customers, but when we're talking to Oracle as well, because we are so well ingrained with Oracle in each of their different ecosystems. We sort of can bring all of those points together, even within Oracle or with our clients, dealing with tech reps, dealing with Oracle University, maybe it's Oracle Guided Learning. The apps themselves, you can still buy PeopleSoft applications through the Apps Unlimited team. And then the strategy and development team, who all did their expert presentations on the first day. This is where we sit, smack in the middle. And the two things you're going to learn today, the delegation framework and the fact that Spirit C equals PeopleSoft. Just, you can write that down if you want. That's the key message that I want to leave you with on this particular slide. Everything we do, every single thing that every offering that we have is centered around the PeopleSoft solutions. All right. You're into training, and who isn't? This is where Spirit C got our start, and we still focus almost everything we do around training. We are an Oracle University partner, the Oracle University partner for PeopleSoft. And so if you're interested, take a snapshot of that QR code. This presentation will be made available. You can click the link to our site, see everything that's out there that you might be of interest in. Okay. Let's go into the topic of delegation framework. Why all of a sudden are we seeing a lot of interest in this tool that's been around a little while now? And I would submit that we are finally, maybe that is also a too harsh of a word, but we are seeing customers that are adopting an ERP first philosophy. In other words, the business processes that they execute will be within their ERP system. And so expanding the use of that system to include e-procurement in purchasing and mobile expenses, and really taking advantage of the end-to-end processes that exist in delivered ERP functionality, maybe adding modules to round out the suite of products, but expanding the use of PeopleSoft for a much larger user community and adopting the fluid approval workflow approach. Okay. So when we see organizations stepping up their game and rolling out modules that are for the casual user out there, those that only log on to PeopleSoft to do an expense report or do a purchase requisition or a performance review. These types of things um, are expanding our user community within the PeopleSoft product line exponentially sometimes. And these folks are now a part of the approval process, the electronic workflow approval process. Um, we've also seen an adoption because of the fluid user interface. So as the fluid user interface has been introduced and expanded to the point where it is ubiquitous now throughout PeopleSoft, it is enhancing the ability to do mobile approvals and use the approval framework as the standard for workflow approvals within your organization. So it's been streamlined. The fluid approval tile allows a single shopping for all of the approvals that are in your queue. And now we're at a point where we've got users that may need to delegate those approvals. Took me a while to get there, but I landed the plane. That's why now. The problem, you've got your user community out there. You've got increased users. We've got fluid approvals, but you've got people that have too many or are leaving for a week or a month or forever, and they need help. Maybe they simply are supervisors who aren't system users, don't get into the system. I see healthcare professionals, physicians that fall into that category all the time, where their focus is on patient care and not on approving workflows of expense reports of their direct reports. So lots of reasons why we've got an issue here, and the solution is now the PeopleSoft delegation framework. It actually was built originally on the HCM platform, migrated onto FSCM. Again, identical functionality between across the two modules or the two pillars. It is now out there and ready to use. It's simply a matter of figuring out what the tasks are to get it working, get it set up. Sometimes it's a matter of the user roles that need to be added for each of the users within the organization. Get those put together, and you can pretty much roll this out without customizing. We haven't had a need for our customers that have rolled out delegation framework to customize in any way. So, so far, we're batting 1,000 in that regard. It does allow you to perform delegations on behalf of someone. So let's just say that there's an abrupt departure from the organization, or for some reason, a user is just not able to log on and perform the delegation of their approvals themselves. There are ways to have a delegation administrator, if you will, do those delegation requests on behalf of the users, so that it can still flow through as if the user created it without having the user have to log in and do that themselves. So how does it get set up? Best practice number one, I would suggest to you spend some time in your demo environment. Demo is a great way to learn some of these new features and functions, learn about what delivered roles and permission lists are put together. I'm not saying copy them. I'm just saying learn what Oracle has delivered in the demo environment. And in the demo environment, if you are able to log on with a user that might mimic VP1-like access, there is a homepage out there called Configuration Specialist. And the Configuration Specialist is a whole bunch of tiles that are essentially navigation collections of setup processes for the newer features and functions that have been delivered over the years in each of the images and tools versions, okay? So there's one under the Configuration Specialists homepage called Setup Delegations. Isn't that fun? So there's my lesson number one. Use the navigation collection that's there to learn how to do your setup and take advantage of it. So let's dive into this. From the setup delegations tile, we get to this navigation collection. The nice thing about a navigation collection is you can order the pages in the order that you would use them to set up the system. I don't know if it's ironic or not, but for some reason, let's say, the delivered menu path, if you use the navigation, isn't in this order. If you end up sorting alphabetically, it's obviously not in that order. And so it is very convenient to have the navigation collection delivered for you that you can use to step through the setup of fluid delegation framework, okay? The first thing is the installation settings, highest level. I highly recommend you change nothing on this page. Go out there and save that page. The delegation default implementer page, that's fine, EODL. EODL you're gonna find is the kind of the 4-digit abbreviation for their permission lists and the roles that are delivered. More on that at the very, very end. When you're looking to use this tool, even in demo, you're gonna have to add those roles to certain users so that you can see the delegation and actually test the process. Okay, installation settings. Go out there, make sure that's there, hit save. Then we'll go on to the transaction categories. Now these are delivered. You might have that list the way it is. You might choose to set up your own category list. What does that mean? Well, on the very next page, you're going to see that when we go to set up your workflow transactions, you have to assign a transaction category. And in typical PeopleSoft fashion, there's a setup page that has a required field that's a drop-down list. And that drop-down list is these transaction categories. And the whole idea is that you may be able to compartmentalize many different approval processes within a transaction category, making it easier for your users to process a delegation or accept that delegation or review those that they've already processed. Okay, so you got to set up your transaction categories first. Once those are done, then you can go into your workflow transactions. Now, I'm taking a bit of a leap of faith that you've set up your workflow transactions under the application workflow engine. I don't even want to call it the new workflow tool in PeopleSoft, right? There's the super old version of workflow. Hopefully you're not using that. Hopefully you are using AWE, and I will extend that hope to you have begun at least to adopt moving the AWE onto the fluid approval tile, right? Hopefully you can streamline all of the workflows that you have within your pillar, financials is my example, into one fluid approval tile. And that means you're using the fluid approval in the approval workflow engine, the AWE. Once you have the AWE going, every workflow that you've set up is available for you, the transaction, and this is where you categorize, right? So you have to say, okay, for delegations, these are the transactions I'm going to allow delegation. Pick them all. If you're using workflow, you want users to be able to delegate any workflow that could come their way. If they're delegating, it makes all the sense in the world. Now they can pick different delegates for each category, but you want them to be able to delegate any workflow approval that comes their way, because if they're delegating, there's a good reason why they aren't going to be able to do that transaction approval themselves. So, lesson learned, best practice, get them all listed. Even get them listed if you're not yet using that workflow, so you don't have to remember to come back and add it in later, okay? So get your categories set, get your transactions built, and then now you've got the ability, you'll see this list when you go to do your delegations will be available for the person that is processing a delegation request, okay? Next, the delegation transaction. So this is when you set up your approval workflow, you're going to pick your delegation transactions. You're going to go through and you're going to review each and every one of these in your delegation transaction setup. So I'm using expense reports as an example. Okay, so you pick your expense report transaction, the approval transaction type, right? That's what we're delegating is the approval workflow engine. And we're going to go ahead and select that. And when we select that, you come into the transaction setup page. It's effective dated. What can we learn here? Well, the component in expenses approval is the EX sheet approver component. Here, if you add a role, if you leave the role blank, that's fine. That's totally fine. I will tell you, best practice, I believe, is that you should have an approver role in your organization, and it doesn't hurt to give that approver role to everybody. Here's why. If they are just an employee, let's say they're not a supervisor yet, if you want to be able to delegate to them, it's okay for them to have the approver role. If they have the approver role and they aren't eligible to approve anything, nothing will be routed to them anyway. Okay, it is not going to unnaturally send approvals to someone just because they have the approval role. It will only do it if they fit the approval path and if they have the role. So if you give them, everyone, the role of approver, there will be an approval tile on their homepage and it will be empty all the time until such time as they either have delegates that are not delegates, employees that they are an approver for, or if they become a delegate. Okay. Now, can you get around that? Yes. Yes, you can. What happens if you want to temporarily assign a approver role? You're going to set up a separate role, not the approver, but you're going to set up, say, the delegate approver role. It's going to be the identical role as a core approver role, and you're going to put that delegate approver role up here. And what happens is if I don't have that role, if I don't have an approver role, during the time frame that I am a delegate for someone who is an approver, I'm going to receive this role, okay? And then when my delegation period is over, that role gets removed. So my advice, you don't need to go do all of that if you simply give everyone the core approver role. No need to put anything in here. If you don't like that idea and you want to have temporary approval authority for delegates who normally wouldn't have that, make it a separate role. Here's also why. When the delegate period is over, the role gets removed. So if you give the core approver role, that core approver role comes away, even if they're supposed to have it. That's why you have to have one for core and one for delegate if you're going that route. Anyway, I think I've belabored that point. Just give everyone the approver role. It's not going to give them unusual approver access unless they are a delegate. Okay. So I got it. All that temporary role, you get it. Once these are set up, once all of this is set up, you're pretty much ready to roll. I do have a slide at the end that highlights the delivered delegation roles that are out there. There's only two: EODL administrator and EODL user. And you need to have EODL user to participate in the delegation process, okay? To create a delegation, assign it, or to accept it as someone who is receiving the delegation request, okay? That's the EODL user role. EODL administrator would be someone who would be setting up the administration, as well as can be the one who executes delegation requests on behalf of another employee. Okay, so that's the administrator is someone who can administer delegations that exist. They could revoke them if they need to. They could create on behalf of the user if they're unable to do that themselves. Okay, those two roles need to happen. Once they do, then we can add a tile, and this tile takes you to a dashboard, the delegations dashboard. This tile is available once you, I think you have to be, image 44, 41, somewhere in the earlier 40s. The tile is available. You add it. It can be added even if you don't have the EODL user role. But what happens is you click on this, you try to do a delegation, it tells you don't have the authority, okay? So make sure those roles or your equivalent, your cloned equivalents are created and assigned to users, and then they'll be able to do a delegation request. Now, this starts with the approver themselves. Okay, in this example, I don't know what user I've got displayed here, but they've got 31 approvals in their queue already. And what they're about to do in the screenshots that follow is they're going to create a delegation. They're going to take some or all of those approvals and pass them on to someone else in the organization, or they're actually going to send them a request to accept the role as a delegate. And that's where we're going here. We're going to go into the delegations tile. This brings us to the delegations dashboard page. And this is where we can create the delegation request. When we click on that tile, we get to an activity guide. Okay, this activity guide is part of that security role that I talked about earlier, the EODL user. If you don't have that, you don't have access to this activity guide. And so make sure when you're cloning the roles that you clone the security access to the activity guide as well. Let's talk about what can happen here. As I take a quick drink of water. There are a start date and an end date. There's a star, and by now I hope you have learned that a star means a required field in PeopleSoft. You have to have a date that this delegation is going to begin. You can enter an end date. So if I happen to know I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks' time, I can say, hey, I want this delegation to happen. I want it to start, on this date, and I want it to end 2 weeks from today. So that when new approvals come through the queue and those approvals come after the end date, those come back to me. I get those approvals to handle going forward. End date is not required. What that means is I can, if I leave it blank, make it open-ended. And so in those cases, this delegation will stay intact until I revoke it, okay? Or until a delegation administrator revokes it for me. I can't, as a delegate, delegate again. Okay, so once I have it in my queue, it's mine to approve, but the delegator they can revoke it and it pulls it back to their queue. A little bit of a nuance there. So it's up to you if you want to enter an end date. I've had a client that wanted to make this required, can do that with page and field configurator if you've seen that. Or you can leave it the way it is and leave it open-ended. And then a comment is a required field, okay? Let's say we get those entered, we can go to the next page, and this is where we get to pick who we're going to delegate to. Who is our delegate? And there's a button where I can add delegates. I can search everybody that is in the PeopleSoft system. You have to have a PeopleSoft ID to be able to receive delegations. And in this case, I must not be logged on as Randall Johnson because Randall Johnson is one of the delegates. So let's just say I don't know who. Let's say it's Rosanna Channing is logged on. And she has added a number of delegates out there by clicking the Add Delegates, finding individuals that she would like to delegate to. And in this case, she has said, you know what, I'm gonna select from my list of delegates, Randall Johnson. That's who's going to be the person who will be approving the transactions I decide that he can approve on my behalf. It should be noted that even with the delegation, and let's say it's Rosanna Channing that is doing the delegation. Delegating to Randall Johnson, the transactions that Randall Johnson approves will still show that Rosanna Channing was the approver, but it was done by Randall Johnson on Rosanna Channing's behalf, okay? You will see both parties that are a part of the delegation approved by Randall Johnson on behalf of Rosanna Channing. So Rosanna is still tied to the approval. It is Rosanna's responsibility to make sure that the person who is receiving her delegation is capable of doing the approvals properly because it is her representation. It is as if she did the approval, okay? Very important. So she picks a highly responsible individual, Randall Johnson, and moves on to the transactions. This is where it lists all of the transactions that we can pick from, and there's in the latest images, this is where there's a little checkbox that allows you to categorize, right? Just show the categories instead of the individual approval tasks, and you can assign at the category level or at the individual workflow level. In this case, Rosanna is going to pick just a few. Okay, Rosanna could be an approver for all of these and more. There's 68 rows of approvals of transactions that she could receive as an approver. She is going to just pick expense reports, financial structure request, which is like chart field request, and journal approval. Those, and going to move on. She could have, I'm going to go up, she could create another delegation for Sanjay and say, I want Sanjay now to do event approval and express billing, credit invoice approval, okay? And have multiple approval processes delegated to different individuals. All right, I think you get it. So once we've selected the delegate and we've selected which transactions we want, or maybe you just want everything, select all, go everything. Then we go on to the next. It's just simply a review and submit. This will summarize which transactions you're delegating and to whom. And we hit submit. And what is happening when we hit submit is a request is going from Rosanna to Randall Johnson. And basically asking Randall Johnson to confirm, yes, I agree to be your delegate. So it's sort of like a workflow in and of itself. We're sending the request on to Randall Johnson. Randall's going to receive it and decide whether he's going to accept or not, okay? And when he accepts these things that are in Rosanna's queue, expense reports, financial structure requests, and GL journals, those approvals that are in her queue are going to flow over to him. And it will be his responsibility to approve them. Any new transactions that come in that are expense reports that would have gone to Rosanna will now flow from Rosanna directly to Randall Johnson. And it will show that Randall Johnson is the approver on behalf of Rosanna Channing. It will flow directly over, okay? And then it will last as long as the duration of the start and end date, or until Rosanna comes in and revokes that delegation. All right, so she submits. When she submits, we can look at the delegates and we can see that Randall Johnson is out there as my delegate. It's active and it's submitted. He has not yet accepted the request. And so Randall has to accept it before those transactions flow into his queue. Let's see where we get. Okay. Now Randall Johnson logs on and we see, oh, it was Kenneth Schumacher that did it. Sorry, I couldn't remember. So it was Kenneth Schumacher that said, I want you to, Randall Johnson, to create, to accept my delegation of authority. It may show up in the approvals. It may show up over here on the notifications bar. It depends on how you configure, how you want your users to be notified that there are delegation requests that are out there that you can accept or decline. In my case, I go in, here's a delegation from Kenneth to me, open-ended, start date, no end date in sight, and all of these transactions, I will go ahead and accept. I say approve. I accept. And then what you would say is all of those types of transactions that were in Kenneth Schumacher's are now in mine. Instead of 5 approvals, I would have 12 or 15. That's how delegation works. If you, I can try, I'm going to try to, how do I get to, I might need to get out of this. Okay, I'm still sharing. Let me go in as Rosanna Channing. And I have facial recognition. Sorry, I have to get close for some reason. Okay, Rosanna has 77 approvals in her queue right now. That's a lot. 77, you're going to see a lot of old data. Again, please remember, this is demo. This is demo data. I'm going to load all of those transactions, 77 of them. There are 4 expense reports out there, 4 that are out there. Some, they're all really old, that are in Rosanna Channing's queue. So let's create a delegation from Rosanna. And so down here, I've got my delegations. I already have one active. Let's take a look. Who are my, not my delegated authorities, my delegates. Calvin Roth is right now doing, between today and the 16th, is approving purchase orders. So I've got one that's out there. That's awesome. Let's go ahead and create a new one. And I'm going to say it's between today and I'm going to leave it open-ended this time. And I'm going to say expense reports. I need your help. We've already added Calvin and Betty and Joanna. I happen to know Calvin's password, so I think we'll go ahead and delegate to Calvin. Again, there's already one active for Calvin on purchase orders. Now I'm going to create it for expense reports. And I'm going to come down and I'm going to say expense reports. That's what I want to delegate here. And I want it to be the approval. We don't delegate the initiation of expense reports or really any of those transactions. I think that might be a remnant of what was built in HCM. None of that is functioning, to my knowledge, on the financials and supply chain suite of products. So we're going to say, I want approval, delegation. Right now, no end date, Calvin, expense reports, help. Yep, I'm good. Submit. Now, I've submitted and it's out there. My delegates, I should have two, right? This open-ended one that's submitted, this other one that has been accepted. Now let's take a look. I still have 77 approvals out there, and they still include those expense reports. So let's see what happens when I log on as Calvin. And I don't think we have notifications turned on, so it might not show up in the notification window. And we don't have email notifications turned on either. Yeah, it's not quite showing up over here. So let me navigate into delegations and my delegated authorities. Okay, and I've got this one that has been submitted, right? And I've got this one that has been accepted. So let's go into the submitted one and let me accept. Okay. Oh, wait, before I do, let me hit no. Before I do, let's take a look at 22. Calvin has 22 approvals. Are any of them expense reports? None. So Calvin Roth has no expense reports to approve in his queue right now. Let's go back into delegations. Let's see what is going on. It looks like Rosanna is wanting me to take on, let's take a look at the details. Oh, this time she wants expense reports, but she's not gonna, she has no end date. No end date in sight. Cool. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and this time I really will accept it. Yes, the answer is yes. I accept your delegation request. That can be in workflow as well. So your approval workflow, you could set up so that it shows up on that approval tile if you want, or the notifications, email, however you want to drive them to the page where they gladly accept the delegation request. And so now I should have some number more than, did that go down? I can't remember what his approvals were before I came in here. Where are my expense reports? Now I'm going to be red-faced. I don't see those expense reports showing up. Oh dear. I might have just shown you something that is something that we've tested, and that is I think those expense reports might have come from Calvin Roth that went to Rosanna Channing for her approval, and she can't delegate them down to him. Oh boy, am I embarrassed. I should have picked someone else when I did the delegation request. It should have showed up just like these purchase orders that I just created earlier today, where we would see that this particular approval originally was in Rosanna Channing's queue, and now they're sitting in my queue. And we see that they're delegated by Rosanna Channing and in my queue. I apologize for that little snafu. I probably should have thought that one through and who I was selecting as my delegate. But here we are. These PO approvals are appropriate for Calvin to approve on behalf of Rosanna Channing. And this is how they would look. And it actually shows that all the way through the system that Calvin has approved it, but it is with Rosanna Channing's approval authority. Okay? So that is the process. I do want to highlight some roles and permission lists and batch processes. So the last, I think, thing I would leave you with, let me go back into presentation mode. What I would leave you with is take a look at these roles and the permission lists and make sure you clone them, right? Do what it is that you need to do so that you can have your administrator, your users, your setup, and the folks that are going to process, accept, and perform delegation. And then make sure you have this batch process set up. So what this particular process, there's no parameters on the run control page. It's just run it, and the as of date is today every time. And so this is one of those processes that you're going to want to schedule on a nightly basis. And what this does is it looks at anything that was out there that has an end date, who has passed, is going to remove that delegation. No longer will that delegation be valid. It will be ended, and it flags it as ended and removes that delegation from that day going forward, but only if this process is running. If you don't run this process, it doesn't know, even though the end date was there, it doesn't know the system to remove the delegation. It also performs the process of when delegations are revoked. It will pull all of the data, and then anything that was in the queue of the delegate will flow back to the original approver. Okay, so this batch process is pretty essential that once you get your delegation framework up and running, that this be scheduled to run on a nightly basis. You only need to run it once a day. It's effective as of a specific day. So once you run it every day, you're going to cover any day that could be the end day of an individual's delegation timeline. Okay, I think I got all the way through everything I wanted to cover, and we might have time. So, Mark, I don't know if there are any questions in the chat.
Yes, there are a couple.
Okay, let me take a look. I got to get to that part of my screen. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Is there a way? Let me move this. Is there a way to limit the list of users you delegate to? Only those who are in the same business organization? So, great question. I don't think that there is a delivered way to limit. Oh, I didn't get to the top of the questions. There isn't a way to limit that's delivered to my knowledge, okay, to my knowledge. However, we can make it a rule that you can only delegate to people who have the role, okay? It's not going to limit the drop-down list, unfortunately. That is just any user in the system. But we can set it so that you can only pick a resource and delegate to someone who has a natural approval authority. If you were to customize this, you could conceivably add a little filter on that drop down to look for a user's existing roles. And if the approver role does not exist, simply don't display that user. Create a view table perhaps and point to the view table. But those are some customizations. There's no delivered way to limit the list of people who can become a delegate. And that, I think, is intentional. Because you do have situations where you need to delegate to individuals who aren't already a job class of supervisor or higher. But very good question. Is the existing batch process for non-fluid delegations still applicable for fluid delegations for those delegators that are set to be active in the future? I believe it is. I believe it is. I am a advocate of moving everything that you can to fluid. And so anything I ever do in presentations, in fact, at Spirit of C, it's a fireable offense to do demos in Classic anything. We don't have Classic pages turned on. So I don't have a lot of expertise to give you any kind of advice on non-fluid processes. But I do believe that that process is still there and works. I haven't tested it, and I can't vouch to how it works in comparison to the fluid. Okay. Is there specific setup that is needed to route delegations to the user profiles? No. This is the beauty, is as long as we have either everyone has the approver role or we have that temporary role. As soon as you accept the delegation, when you accept that delegation, you are going to see those and I didn't prove it in my demo, but you're going to see those transactions flow to you automatically upon acceptance because you have that role. If you use that temporary role, The role is there as long as the delegation is valid. Once it expires or is revoked, that temporary role is removed.